recording.
Brilliant job.
Streaming to YouTube, yeah.
Fantastic. Right, we got everyone here.
Yeah, true.
Okay. So hi everyone. Just wanna, if you haven't already, just to make sure that you keep yourself on mute, and if you keep your video off while we're doing the screen talk, and there'll be a chance for a Q&A session afterwards. So I'm just going to quickly do a little intro about Films for Food, and then we've got Howard over here, who's one of the directors of the Peckham Nunhead Free Film Festival, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to talk Siana, the producer of 1500 and Counting, and we're going to have a discussion about the documentary, and then we'll go into a Q&A. So first off, just a bit of background about Films for Food. Films for Food is a program that me and Richard from Rainbow Collective, we've been running for the last few years now in response to the amount of people that were using food banks. At that time, it was 1 million. Now it's, we're talking nearly towards 2 million users of food banks. And usually at our in-person events, we show a documentary, like we would have shown this documentary, 1500 and Counting. We would have had a Q&A with Siana and any of the other filmmakers involved. And the audience, instead of bringing, paying for a ticket, you'd bring a bag of non-perishable food, which we would then donate to our local food bank, which is Peckham, also called Southwark Food Bank. And yeah, it's just a way of bringing together film and activism and supporting your local community. And that's what this is about. We actually haven't done any Films for Food events since the lockdown, and the good people at Peckham Nunhead Film Festival, you know, talked to us and suggested we do one in collaboration with them. And so for today's event, if you haven't already, we've asked people if they can make a small donation to the Southwark Food Bank to support the work that they're doing. I think Howard is going to put a link into the chat, so if you check on there. And yeah, if you can, please do, just look them up, Southwark Food Bank, and you know, make a small donation. Or if you're in the area and if you're able to, just drop off some food there, just to support the work they're doing. I know they're going through a pretty hard time at the moment. The last I spoke to them, they were desperately in need of toothpaste, and yeah, you know, the pandemic's affecting everyone. If you're able to, like I said, please do. I'm gonna pass it over to Howard before we start having the main discussion about the film. Howard, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Anand. Thank you everyone for joining tonight's discussion as part of the Peckham Nunhead Free Film Festival. This is our 11th year, and I'd like to, a big thank you to Rainbow Collective for organising this. And also, this is the 7th Films for Food collaboration that we've done together, which have normally happened at the Green in Nunhead. And like Hanan said, this is online, so I put a link in for Peckham in the chat. A huge thank you as well to Siana from Courageous Films. Thank you so much for being a part of our festival. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, and for allowing us to screen this really very powerful film. I hope everyone's had a chance to has had a chance to view it. It is a very powerful piece. Yeah, I'd just like to say just about the donations. Yeah, please, if you can, then that would be great, because like Hanan said, we're online, so it would be great if people can help out and help the Southwark Food Bank out. There's more events as part of the festival, and I'll post those a bit later in the discussion at the end. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. I'll pass you back to Hanan and Richard.
All right, thank you everyone. So Siana just posted some details to the film as well. Keep an eye on the chat, just keep that window open. We're gonna be posting things in there. So I just wanna say, so if you book through Eventbrite, the plan was that everybody would watch the documentary and then you would come here for the Q&A. Now, if you haven't watched the documentary, we're gonna post the link back up, and the link is gonna be online till we've talked to Siana, and it's going to be online till midnight, and then after that it's going to go off. So if you haven't seen the film, go on the chat. There's the link there. You can either go watch it now. This this stream is going on to YouTube, and it's going to stay on there, so you won't miss out on the Q&A, or stay for the Q&A and then afterwards watch the film. But like I said, tonight it's going to go off, so please, like, definitely watch the documentary. So, okay, now that we got that out of the way and we've introduced ourselves, I want to bring in our good friend, somebody that we worked with for many years and really proud to work with. You know, this documentary is brilliant. The work that she's done is brilliant. I know there's the director of the film couldn't be here. Siana, if you can just confirm, I think he's just had a baby. And
Troy's
he
now
has
family life.
So good luck to Troy, and I hope he knows his life just radically changed. He's not going to be sleeping that much from now on. So, as a father of two, I can tell him that. But, you know, I thank you so much, Siana, for joining us today. And thank you so much for making that documentary. It's so needed. And I've seen it a couple of times now. And not only is it moving, it's just shocking. And I think more people need to see that. So let's start talking. Richard's here. I know Richard's got a bunch of questions, you know, for this Q&A. So Richard, please jump in with the questions. But Siana, introduce yourself and maybe just talk about, you know, when you decided to make this film, and, you know, how you and the team, you know, went about doing this.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Hanan and Richard, and Howard and everyone at the Peckham and Nunhead Free Film Festival for having us. Originally a South East London girl myself, so loving to be part of this. My name is Siana Bangura, and I am a writer and a producer of film and theatre, and I am now the founder of Courageous Films. So how did we get here? Well, I've been a writer for many years. I've seen injustice. I'm going to come to all of that. So I've been a writer for many years, and it was in 2015 a man called Sheku Bayo was killed by police in Scotland. And really his story was the catalyst for everything, to be honest. So prior to Sheku Bayo being murdered by the police in Scotland, in Kirkcaldy, you know, I was very much a community organiser. I'd founded a platform called No Fly on the Wall, particularly looking at, you know, Black British women and the experience there in the UK. So, you know, I was very aware, basically, and kind of, you know, doing this kind of work. However, even though I was aware and doing this kind of work and doing a lot of collaborations with Troy Idu, who is the director of the film, he and I have been long-term collaborators, I also wasn't actually aware of the level of state violence basically in this country, particularly when it comes to policing. So, you know, this is 5 years ago now. So in terms of what drew me to Sheku's story, really it was his name. So my background is I'm originally Sierra Leonean, and we're quite a small diaspora, so don't really see us in the news very often, and when you do, it's not great news usually. So I just noticed his name on Twitter, in all honesty, and I just wondered, oh, what's going on here? Who's Sheku Bayo? Found out a bit more and found out that he was dead. And then I assumed straight away, like a lot of people still do to this day, that, oh, he must have been killed by the police in the USA, because although things happen here, what I was reading sounded like a US story, basically. Then a bit more digging, and it turned out it was in Scotland, just next door. And so that kind of was a domino effect. I ended up writing a piece, I can send a link in a moment, but I ended up writing a piece for a platform that no longer exists, but is archived, called Media Diversified. I was a writer for them. And I wrote this piece and it kind of went viral. And then, you know, his like friends and the degrees of separation were just quite small. And people started reaching out to me and being like, oh, you know, I'm this to Sheku and I'm that to Sheku, and we need help to like raise this story and all that kind of stuff, particularly outside of Scotland. So I was really lamenting about this case really to Troy, and then we were kind of like, we feel really hopeless and have no idea really what to do. And we were only starting to learn about organisations like the United Families and Friends campaign, who have been campaigning tirelessly for over 20 years on this very subject, right? Deaths in custody, deaths at the hands of state. So not just actually policing, but also in mental health settings, in detention centres, and the like. So we found out about them. We got in touch with Ken Farrow of Migrant Media, the person, one of the people who created Injustice, which is mentioned in the chat. And again, it was just like a journey of learning. So, you know, we ended up, you know, Ken very much like supported us. Migrant Media were very supportive. Troy and I went on this journey, kind of just thinking, well, what can we do? So I am a writer and I have somewhat of a platform, and Troy makes films. So what do we do with this information? If people like us who are pretty engaged didn't really know the depth of this, and I think it's also to do with the fact that we're of a certain age as well, there must be loads of other people who just don't know. So what can we do? Let's do something to at least raise awareness. So we decided it made sense to make a film, and we were super naive. I don't think we at all realized the amount of work that it would take. We really thought this film would take a year to make, basically, at most, and it's taken us 5. And what you will see, if you've not seen already, it's a 30-minute director's cut, especially created for online viewing. The actual film is full length, so you know, it's been quite a journey. But we decided to create a film because we thought it was really important to kind of contribute to quite a small canon of work in this vein. So we did that. And you know, when we started, the story of Shepherd Bio is definitely the thread. It's not the only story in the film, but it's the thread that ties it all together. After going to Scotland and filming with Sheku's family, it was very emotionally draining, actually. And then Sarah Reid was murdered in the following year, and that was kind of the final like push that we needed to like crowdfund for the film, to get the resources that we needed, because prior to that we were just doing it on shoestring budget, money here from me, money here from there kind of thing. So we crowdfunded and actually ran a successful crowdfund campaign. And then, yeah, we were able to kind of get the kit, get all the stuff that we needed to really take it to the next level. So we completed the film. It's taken 5 years to make. It was officially released actually in May of last year, the full-length feature film. And then we re-released it this year in light of the COVID, but actually in light of the Black Lives Matter moment. Everybody was getting in touch, like, Siana, we need to see this film, we need to see this film, you need to put it out there. And so, yeah, we took our time to carefully put together something appropriate to kind of screen in this moment. And here we are. So we've just completed our 2-week virtual tour that we did over the summer, and that was a huge success. You know, it was covered by The Guardian and like various other platforms, and involved, all along the way involved Sheku's family, and particularly his sister, Caddy Johnson, and also the sister of Christopher Alder, Janet Alder, who is a good friend of mine. And yeah, we just hope to continue screening it, hoping to raise awareness, but also beyond raising awareness, like, we're in this moment where you need to actually do something. And for me, there are hopefully calls to action in there, key call to action being to support the United Families and Friends campaign. And in this moment of like people talking a lot about anti-racism, right, you need to be thinking about that as well. So this film kind of at least contributes to the kind of resources that you need to understand the level of state violence in this country, and hopefully gives you, you know, you can feel a little bit hopeless maybe like thinking about this stuff, but I think it's really important to say that, as Ken says in the film towards the end, this is a lifelong battle. That is not a loss. Once you kind of accept that, then you know we're in this for the long haul. So that's the story really of kind of where we've been and where we are right now. And then Courageous Films, just to say, obviously in the way it should be is that the film house exists before the film, but we ended up being the other way around. So off the back of doing 1,500 and counting, we founded this film production house because we realized it's really important to like do similar work to the likes of Migrant Media. We need more of that kind of stuff, and we hope to make more films even looking at kind of like borders and migration, climate justice, the arms trade, all these big issues that I'm really keen to sink my teeth into. So yeah, we're on a new kind of horizon and a new journey now with everything off the back of this film. So thanks for having me. That's the context.
So Siana, like, you kind of touched on it as well. You thought that he must have been American at first because stuff doesn't cut through. And like, I was at the demo at Tottenham Police Station a couple of weeks back, and you know, like Stafford Scott, he was saying he was organising it, he was talking, and he was saying like, however much it's a relief in some ways to see finally like just tens of thousands of young people, especially like kids, turning out on the street with this kind of flame lit in them by the killing of George Floyd. And yeah, people did have signs and saying UK is not innocent and whatnot, but he was saying like, why is it an American catalyst that sparks it? Like, why isn't there that outrage? Like some of the just the depravity that the hand of the police and the state that you see in this film. Like, what do you think is the barrier that's just seems to be stopping the British population from having one of those killings as a catalyst to action?
Such a good question, Richard. And actually, the word you use, depravity, is completely accurate. Like, the stuff you see in the film, it's just a snippet, right? It's depraved behavior to do that to other people. And I think just even thinking about the death of Shekabaya, right, it coincided in that moment where we were also marching for Eric Garner, for example. And, you know, there was me, like, out there at Westfield campaigning, doing die-ins and stuff like that for deaths in the US. And that was nothing that really struck Troy and I. How are we doing all this stuff? And like, it feels like nobody has batted an eyelid for a death in Scotland, which is just next door, let alone the kind of ones that have taken place historically in England, right? Cherry Groce, for example. And again, you know, Christopher Alder and Sean Rigg and people like that. So for me, you know, there's a bigger question over the complacency that we still find in the UK. I actually think this moment of Black Lives Matter and in the blueprint of the pandemic as well, things feel different and have felt different. I remember even saying, I'm, you know, pretty skeptical, in all honesty, in many ways about this country and its capacity to change. But something felt a bit different in this moment. But you can already see that people, for want of a better term, are like getting tired of hearing about these Black people complain about their condition. For heaven's sake, can we go back to being polite? Can we go back to normal? And this is it. At the end of the day, every system in this country is built to keep the British public from ever engaging with our true history, with colonial histories, right? When you see the National Trust tweet something about, you know, the buildings that are, you know, mired in a history of slavery and colonialism, what is the response you see under those tweets? It's, gosh, you're being woke. I'm going to like revoke my membership from this. There's such denial, and it's almost like offensive to particularly white people for you to even speak about racism. People are far more concerned. People are far more concerned about racist than actual racism. And so there's just a huge denial in this country. People are in denial of the fact that not only is the UK not innocent and complicit, the UK is the great exporter of racism. The UK is the racist parent of the USA. And I think this is something that people don't even want to engage with. When we see in the US, of course, I think you would be hard done by to argue that it's not a racist country. But in the UK, you very much can gaslight people. You very much can debate people's experiences. You very much can play, oh, a devil's advocate. You know, maybe those people, those Black and brown people did something. That's why the police killed them with their bare hands. That's why they're stopped and searched at ridiculous rates. That's why. And there's always a capacity and tendency to explain away things. I think people are in denial, are comfortable with saying, well, not everything's perfect in the UK, but at least we're not the US. So for me, this is willful ignorance. There's cognitive dissonance. People in this country are proud of our colonial history, the bit that they know, the bit that tells them that their granddad fought in World War II and World War I, and they don't want to hear anything else. And they're proud to say that, well, actually, you know, the UK helped its colonies. And there's no irony when people think about the fact that the national dish in this country is a curry, right? And there's no irony when people enjoy Black cultures, but then tell Black people and brown people to go home, you know? And I think that the education system is to blame, but it's all by design.
And so, because that's one more, and then we can like, then Hanan's got, and then there's, and in the chat, if people want to post in the chat.
Yeah, definitely. Shall we just say that, Richard, quickly? If people have got questions, maybe you start posting it in the chat, and then we can start asking them. But we'll go into the Q&A section part very soon. Richard, you ask away, mate.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a quick one actually, but so like Siana, like, I know that from your work, like you it's not just in your writing or your filmmaking, like really like a lot of your life revolves around trying to prompt these changes and support movements in all manner of ways, from the political to creative. And in this film, like it seemed like the police is like the blunt instrument that's being used, right? So when you see this shocking footage, it's the police that are manhandling, it's the police that are beating and abusing. But what I thought was powerful was how in the stories you see how much deeper it is than just the police, right? Like everything from like, and some of the most upsetting elements. Like, you know, it's the hospices. Like, what they're sending this parents home in a taxi to go find an undertaker with their dead baby, or it's like it's the state. Somehow managing to like dismember like Matthew's body and bury an old woman in his place. Like, some of this, like this stuff, the judiciary that gives 20 hours community service to a policeman who's caught like beating and lacerating this woman. Like, that's not just the police, that's the hospitals, it's the mental health services, it's the judiciary, it's the state, it's state violence. And then as an activist, and when we look at, like, when we talk about how do we get people to engage, how do we get people to fight back, like that can be overwhelming. Like, is it the police that we should be, say, targeting as activists? Is it the state, or should we look at where we are and where we're best placed to fight back against this?
Huge question, Richard. You know, I think there's a few things in there. Now, what I would say is, first and foremost, I think it's important for people to understand that everything is connected. So Kimberly Crenshaw gave us the term intersectionality, right? And that's important. This idea that all of us face oppression on these interlinking axes, basically. I'm never just a woman. I'm never just a Black person. I'm at all times a Black woman, for example, amongst other things, being working class, having a migrant history, so on and so forth. And even though that term, like diversity, which is useless, all of these really useful, important terms are being watered down and rendered almost meaningless, we have to resist that with a term like intersectionality and decolonizing. But now, when I think of a book, like one of my favorite books of all time is Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis, right? And for me, I was like, that book is transformational because it really taught me to like level up my thinking about all this stuff. So for a long time, I was very concerned with the intersectionality of self, which is an important starting point. But we now need to think about the intersectionality of struggle. So if we think about kind of a global landscape, right? I won't say in all countries, but I would find it difficult to name maybe one country that doesn't have an element of kind of like state corruption. We have to understand that the state is everywhere. And so when we think about the police aren't operating in isolation, as you say. They are operatives, you know, they are operatives of the state. And we have to remember that the police as well, if you think about the history of the police, a lot of people don't know, they started off as slave patrols, right? They were created to protect goods, and those goods included enslaved people. They were created to quell political dissent. And so when people talk about reforming the police, you can't, because it is mired in colonialism. Its very roots and history are colonial, so you can't reform that. That's the first thing. The other thing is, again, as you say, the police are one element of the state. They're a very visible element, but again, who's behind it? When you look at, they're not called the IPCC anymore. I forget, they change the name all the time. It's like IPCO, whatever, but they're supposed to be the Independent Complaints Commission, the people who police the police. So we're looking at films like Injustice and films like Who Police the Police. They tell us that actually even that body can't police the police because it's made up of ex-cops. So the state is everywhere, right? It's, you know, .gov.uk, those are the elements. Mental health settings, mental health practitioners, all of these, you know, borders control, all of these things work hand in hand. When you look at the fact that actually our police force is militarized, and we've seen that very much in this Black Lives Matter movement as well, okay? And I talk a lot about that in my other work at Campaign Against Arms Trade, for example. So we see that everything is interlinked. Now, understanding that everything is interlinked can feel overwhelming. You start to think, well, what on earth can I do? Like, what can I do as one person or two people or whatever? And I think it's really important to always know that change never comes from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. And, you know, it's not a joke when people talk about people power. All the things that we've won, the Labour movement has won, that's people power. Things like having a weekend, right? The National Health Service, which the Tories wanted to actually sell off. And then we had a pandemic. And now, I mean, we'll see, let them try it again. They were already trying it underhand. But the point is, people always win, but it's a long, hard battle. And for me, again, like I said, I'm quite skeptical at the moment, and I actually do feel very world weary, if I'm being very, very honest with you. I think to myself, it looks like we are on the cusp of opportunities that actually transform the world. But then you look and you see the everyday violence. You still see that there are people in this country who, at a very basic level, are just denying that racism is real. At a very basic level, are denying that injustice is a real thing. And I find that exacerbating, because you need a critical mass of people. I think what is important about this moment is that on those marches, you saw Black, brown, white people, and everyone in between. And I think that was very, very powerful. And I actually think that's what shook what really shook the core of the state. I think seeing that actually this is everybody's on the grounds this time, but I think it's one thing to get people to be awake. The other thing is to keep people awake, and I think that's where, at least in this moment, our struggle is, because I think people move with the ebbs and the flows. They move with the trend. And so I think it's very painful to watch that Black Lives Matter seems yet again to be like a trend, when actually this is a call to action regarding people's lives. And I think for me, I find it disappointing to see a lot of people have already kind of gotten tired, have gotten like fatigued with actually opening up. And so I think the big question is, what are people willing to sacrifice? And I think this is where we have it. A lot of people aren't willing to sacrifice things. They aren't willing to put themselves on the line. They're not willing to put their careers on the line. They're not willing to put their material condition on the line for actual true justice. And so I think it's really tricky, but I do think that we should never lose hope, and we need to be thinking about all the things we've already won. And again, when it comes back to education, we're not taught all the things that people have won. We're not really taught that in depth about the labour movement. And certainly as Black people and everybody else, we're not taught about, when we are taught about Black history, it's often US history and some slavery. We don't get taught about the Haitian Revolution, for example, an example of the people winning against slavery. So there's all these things going on. You can feel fatigued, but we have to remember that there's a lot of people power. We have won many things, but the question is, once you're awake, what are you doing to stay awake? And I think we're struggling at the moment with people basically going back to sleep and turning a blind eye again.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Siana. Kind of just before we go to people with this, we've got some questions in the chat. I just kind of wanted to follow up because you talked about education, and that's one of the first I thought watching the documentary. I thought this would be great if this was in schools, in colleges. So many places I can think of where this could be. Is there anything that you're doing where we can get this film, you can get this film into those arenas?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I actually, I welcome anybody who's in this space who's like, yeah, I'm a teacher and I want to get this in my school, let's talk. I think there are different ways to distribute films, as we know, right? And I think we are still very much keen on just making sure as many people see it as possible. But I think it's very important to highlight that we are very intentional with how we screen this film. We're very intentional about how we put this film out in the world. And the reason is because we are very protective over the families that let us into their lives. We're very protective over the stories that we were given the trust to put out into the world. And what I mean about this is, so often, for example, many people watched the video of George Floyd being murdered, executed, lynched for almost 9 minutes. People watch that you really, and I'm sure maybe there are people in this space that did that. And although it's not a criticism, but I would ask you the question, why did you watch that video? And why did you have to watch that video to feel moved into action? Why did you have to watch someone die as if it was normal to not feel numb? For me, I think it should never be normal to watch stuff like that. And actually, it's only when people only watch videos of that, of Black people being killed. I don't really think there are any other videos out there for you to watch of anybody else being killed in such a manner. And even in death, Black people are not afforded dignity. That's the first thing. So I didn't watch that film, but I didn't need to watch it. But the point is, people watched it, and that's definitely one of the big reasons why there was such a eruption, and also the fact that we're in a pandemic, and so people have had to bear witness in a way that they probably wouldn't have if we weren't at a forced standstill. So with all this in mind, I'm actually very against Black bodies being shown in such undignified manners, shown in our worst moments and all of that kind of thing. So with those things in mind and the politics that Troy and I have, it was actually a very difficult choice to put in scenes of violence, particularly certain scenes of violence in this film. And actually, for this director's cut, we adjusted it again so that things, you never know what happens in the online world. You don't want anything being taken out of context. But we did keep in elements of like Sarah Reed being brutalized. And that's always a very difficult moral decision, but we believed that actually in this film, it was important to have that. Sometimes people do need to see to believe, but I really resent that. So because there are scenes of violence in this film, there are elements of this film that, I would never want to just be out in the world with no context. We're very intentional about how we screen it. So yeah, we often try to do like a Q&A and all that kind of stuff in order for people to be able to debrief afterwards, to like just decompress because it's so heavy. But I'm really open to however people want to put this out in the world. We've had international audiences. that's been really important, because there is this lie, you know, particularly I think a US audience often, you know, black folk in the US often think that, oh, it's not so bad in the UK for you guys, like, because your officers don't walk around with guns. Well, firstly, people do get shot in this country. We know the story of Mark Duggan, Jermaine Baker, people do get shot. But at the same time, we're only ever a breath away from being as horrific as the USA, and that's simply because of our gun laws. But yeah, what I would say is just, I'm open to what people want, really. It's all about getting in touch with us. We're pretty easy to find. A weird suggestion we had actually a while ago was a friend of mine who'd said she thinks this film should be shown to police officers at police training. And I was just like, not gonna lie to you, that is definitely not something that was like top of our priority list. I don't really think like this film would move them. I think there's a lot of thoughts around like, oh, there are good officers and it's just a few bad apples. No, the whole cart is rotten. And I think it's deeper. So I think it's beyond kind of showing the officers this. I think they know what happens. Even the good ones stand there and watch their colleagues do the things that they do. So, but I'm open. Get in touch basically if you want us to in any way. And yeah.
Brilliant. So Siana, so if you just go on the chat, there's just a few comments here that maybe we can just talk about. I mean, the first one was from Matthew earlier on. You've just talked about it, Mark Duggan just now.
Yeah.
And I think a phrase that you mentioned earlier on, diversity fatigue, which you just heard today, and it was really, I mean, I just read this thing the other day. I don't know if anybody else has read it. It was something to do with Britain's Got Talent, and so there was like a dance team, and one of their themes was Black Lives Matter for this dance that they did, and they wanted to highlight Black Lives Matter. Obviously, they wanted to make a statement, and it resulted in getting over 1,000 complaints. Like, you know what I mean? I thought, it just shows just like, you know, this what you just talked about earlier on. You know, when you talk about this stuff, it is the line that's at the end of the film. Did you say it was somebody called Lee? I think he says it isn't just like support it for now.
Yeah,
you can't just support, you know, this type of prejudice. It is just temporarily available. It's there always. You have to be with people like us and support communities who are going through this, not just like one-off, just the summer of 2020 or something like that. Yeah. So just a couple of other things. So Tracy mentioned, did making this drain you emotionally? As you said, it took 5 years instead of one, as race is always the elephant in the room.
Oh my God, like that's an easy question to answer. Yeah, it definitely, I've just put the quote in there from Ken. Yeah, it definitely drained us. You know, one of the things we didn't have in place, obviously, you know, kind of starting, and, you know, this is our first feature-length film as well. So although Troy had been a filmmaker before, but I was new to filmmaking in this way, certainly documentary filmmaking, we didn't have in place things like, you know, just someone to talk to us afterwards with regards to our mental health and our emotional well-being. And I think if I was making this film again or doing a project like this in 2020, being 5 years older and knowing what I know now, I'd have different types of kind of like well-being infrastructure in place. You know, just to give you context, like this project started with just 2 Black kids from South London who felt compelled to do something. We felt, you know, we felt enraged to do something, and all we decided we would use what we had, which was just our raw talent, basically, in the spaces that we were talented in, and we decided to use that as something so that we wouldn't do nothing at all. And yeah, but I think we would do things differently now, certainly in 2020. But yeah, it's been an emotionally draining project, but what has kept us going all this time is the responsibility, knowing that if we're drained, we're not the families who have to firstly grieve their loved ones, but then also become activists overnight and campaigners overnight. And, you know, this is our small duty basically to this work. So we were drained, but I think particularly screening it always gives me new life, because it's good to see that people still care about this subject. People care about the film. People wanted it to be out there. People have questions. People want to know what they can do after seeing it. So yeah, draining, but I'm very grateful to have been able and been entrusted to do this work.
It's a huge trust to take on, and yeah, thank you for everything that you've done. So we have another question here from Vashti. So she says, Master Sean Riggs talks about how they try to find a medical condition victim to cause the blame. If you die by the police, your body is made the property of the state, not your family. What they did to Sean's following his death was horrendous. Is there anything that
just to comment on that? They often so there's a pattern. The first thing I thought of when you wrote that, Vashti, was they use this thing called excited delirium, and they use that in Sheku's case essentially to blame them for their death, to say you got so excited you died. You know, a form of asphyxiation basically, and it's just crazy. So look it up, but it's just crazy. And they've claimed that a number of times. Other things, like in the film, you'll see Lee, who's like our narrator, talking about Sarah Reed and how, you know, they had claimed that she sat there and actually self-strangulated, basically. Sorry for the graphic details. And again, there are, I believe, like 10 cases across in the US and the UK criminal justice history of that happening, and 5 are disputed. So really, there's only 5 cases. And so it's extremely, extremely rare. So how is that even possible? There's all these ways that the state makes it seem like actually these people, it's their fault. Whether they killed themselves or not, they were doing something, the officers acted in self-defense. This is a constant thing we see all the time. Sheku Bayo, 11 stone, 12 stone, small man, my height, my size type of dude, you know, all of a sudden he had the strength of Hercules to lift up these officers, 11 of them, 9 of them, who were 20 something stone, and kill, and do you know what I'm saying? And then they got so scared that they killed this man. Like all of these things you'll see, you know, Afua Hirsch talks about it, these ridiculous myths of blackness, this strength, this anger that we have, that means that people have to be terrified and kill us, basically. So there is never any blame, and there are no convictions. In this history, there are no convictions. The only example of a conviction is actually, interestingly, Vashti's put down the 1969 death of David Oluwale. That is the first and only example of any officers having any kind of consequences for killing someone. And the key thing to note about that is, I believe that's the first death on record of kind of a death in custody at the hands of the police. What happens for officers to have some kind of consequences was that another officer told on them. So it shows you that it probably takes other officers to do anything for there to be a semblance of justice. And by justice, the officers just got a slap on the wrist, really, in the grand scheme of things. Pretty weak, in all honesty. So yeah, those are kind of, that's kind of just to say about that anyway.
And I think those are the questions for now. But one of the that just a couple of things. I think one of the things that I thought was you did really well. You just did it now, was how there were so many stats that was told, but they're done in such a great way. Like you just mentioned now with I was shocked when they said that there was 10 people between USA and America. And 5 of them are disputed, but throughout the documentary there's quite a few moments like this, and it's really well done how you and Troy decided to do that. And another thing just wanted to add, and I think really commendable that you've done that, because even though actually when I think of the film, you didn't use that much footage of actual violence, but because in the interviews they talk about this, we get an understanding of the violence. And again, it just shows you the power of the interviews that you were doing with the partners and how much trust that they had in you. I just quickly wanted you to just, maybe for the audience that's here, maybe they could just tell us a bit more about because we know them through our work and we have mutual friends, but you could just tell me about the United Families and Friends campaign. And I think it would be great if, quite a few people on, if you could just go and check out what they do and support them. If you're on Twitter, for them, if you're on Facebook, and all of those things, they do some brilliant work. You just maybe talk a little bit about them, who they are and how that was set up, because it is integral to your doing and what other people in the movement are trying to do as well.
Yeah, I believe earlier in the chat, someone, Richard, or perhaps Nan, actually posted the UFFC link. So the United Family and Friends campaign are a coalition of families and friends of people who were killed at the hands of the police primarily, but also other forms of state violence. Primarily led by Black families, but a number of other people are involved in it, a number of other cases. And yeah, they've been going for over 20 years trying to get this justice, and it's a long, long road, basically. They have an annual march. Their big thing is they have an annual march every October. So I believe this year, Saturday the 31st of October, Central London. If we can maybe put the link somewhere to post it, that's really good. but they, you know, they have this march, and again, it's like a peaceful, mostly, well, no, it's not silent actually, it's a peaceful march, and the whole idea is to, you know, hand something over to, you know, like whoever it is at the time, basically. And yeah, what I would say though is over the years, I think attendance has dwindled. So I think it's always really important if we can boost that march and get more people. You know, it was the 20th anniversary, and you know, it wasn't so widely attended, and so the police treated us as such. Basically, they didn't cordon off the road, they were moving us to the side, just being very disrespectful. And I think it's really important that we have bodies on the ground. You know, this, it's mostly a symbolic act, but for the families, that is really important and an important form of solidarity. The other thing is, yeah, to donate to them. You know, there is a families fund. They actually just did a big crowdfunder recently. I think it's shut now, but triple check that. But they were raising money to, yeah, to just kind of further their work and like change tactics a little bit as well. So yeah, find out more about them. They are the go-to in this country when it comes to families and friends, the network of support when you have a loved one killed by the police. They work closely with Inquest, a charity doing a lot of the kind of research around this. You've got Institute of Race Relations. I've put a report in the chat called Dying for Justice, which is really key actually in a lot of the making of 1,500 and counting. And one of the many reports that we use to kind of get that number 1,500, and to look at the disproportional force used on Black and brown people, which often leads to the deaths basically in these horrific conditions. So yeah, that's UFFC, definitely support them. And there are actually, in this Black Lives Matter moment as well, individual families have been fundraising. So Sheka Bayo's family recently successfully fundraised. I'll put some links in the chat. Janet Alder is continuing to fundraise to write a book about her story. As a reminder, her story includes the horrific details, which sound like something from a horror movie, of her brother, Christopher Alder, his body being swapped with a 70-something-year-old woman, basically, whilst they hid his body in body bags. Again, you're like, this is happening anywhere in the world. This is happening in the UK. This is happening in the modern day. How is this even possible? And yet, these gruesome details, these are things that happen to people in their real lives. So she's fundraising for that. She also wants to launch another legal challenge, and so she just needs funding for that. So I can try and find the link and put it in the chat as well. Support, support, support. You know, I think it's really important for these families not to think that people don't care about them.
And
thank you for that, Siana. Richard, what did you say?
I was going to say, so now, like, obviously you've always got so much stuff on the go, but from a film producing perspective, are you going to be carrying on investigating this issue and digging around this issue? Is there other kind of intersecting themes which Courageous is going to be working on?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you know, I think, so in terms of this particular film, we want to do a few like informal follow-ups, but like the film is the film, you know, and we'll always be doing this work, but it may not necessarily be in kind of this format. But we are going to do a kind of short 10-minute follow-up. Troy and I have agreed this to just, I guess it's more than 5 years later, but the idea, because COVID got in the way, but it's meant to be kind of 5 years later, where are we at kind of thing, particularly with the story of Sheku and Christopher Alder, because we work closely with those two families. So we're still going to do that. I guess it's going to be next year now, so we can get out to Scotland to film with Caddy, and to Hull to film with Janet. You know, again, I'm in talks. I would quite like to do a film that focuses on actually the experiences of Black women in the families, particularly once, you know, your loved one is killed by the state, the impacts, because a lot of these campaigns are led by Black women. They're led by the mums, the sisters, the cousins, you know, the aunties, and it wears them down. And actually they're often left in a situation where they can't work, families are broken up, you know, and it has a real deep personal impact, basically. So I'm wanting to do a film that kind of looks a little bit into that personal impact, and on the people that are left behind, and moving away from kind of police forms of state violence. But as I said, really interested to work on some projects around borders and migration. So I think that's actually going to be one of the immediate next things that we're going to be focusing on. So I'm keen to broaden out with Courageous Films.
We just got a lot of just a question in. I don't know if you can see. The question is, if everyone, it says on the skin becoming police comment that was made. Do you know what other background checks made on that want to become police officers and their political beliefs? That's a really good question. Do you know this, Siana?
No, such a good question. So for those who don't know, what is being referred to there is this like really powerful quote from Chris Sibia in the film, and he says, you know, I remember the skinheads basically just became the police. So the people that used to run him out basically just put on uniforms and carried on doing it, but state sanctioned. And I don't actually know much about the checks that they do. I think what we were looking into was the psychology. And often you find, again, this is not necessarily completely true, so I wouldn't want anyone to say that she said it's the case for everyone, but I do think there is a pattern of hiring people who probably are unhinged in some way, because when it comes to the police in this country, and actually anywhere, there is this level of kind of power that you are above the law, and you should not be, but you actually are above the law when you become a police officer. And I think that level of power is something that attracts a certain type of person. And also even things like, you know, again, you'll have police officers from all sorts of different backgrounds, but often they may hire people who, you know, the options are maybe limited. And so you see the adverts that you have nowadays anyway, trying to like attract black and brown boys and like black and brown girls to be police officers. And it's like, I think, you know, this is like the one place I do not want to see more black people and more brown people in, quite frankly. We don't need any more black and brown police officers. We don't need any officers. We need to be looking at abolition. And for me, I just think there's something about the psychology. Again, I'm not talking from a place of like having been able to like read a lot of research, find out. It's actually very difficult to get people to talk about this. So as a bit of like a little bit of insight, in the early days of doing this project, we actually had a police officer who was an ex-cop on board to like, basically spill some really interesting information, and he pulled out of the project basically. And you can imagine, of course, he pulled out of the project, but at the time he'd given us quite a lot of like disturbing detail basically of his experiences. Actually in the film, although you do not see it in this version, but my friend Adam Pugh, who was a former police officer, he did talk a little bit about the Mark Duggan case in the longer version of the film. And he talked about how he was only in the force for a short amount of time, but he went in with good intentions, hoping to like change it from the inside, and realized very quickly it is not possible to do that. It is not possible. There is this sisterhood, brotherhood mentality. You can't grasp on each other. You know, you do things a certain way. So I couldn't tell you, but I do think there's a psychology there. And I think people who are hungry for power may well be attracted to that particular occupation.
The police as well, they've got like history going like far back, like in terms like with the black and tans in Ireland, you know, like the idea of the state actually getting violent criminals out of prison and then sending them over to do that, or more recently with cases like the Oval Four. And it was Botswana and South African police who'd been doing the enforcing of the apartheid regimes, who were seconded to London to come and, you know, around the time of the revival of the SOS laws. And the British state, quite often when it comes to like racial oppression, physical oppression of racial groups, the British state has a history of going and looking for the most violent candidates and then bringing them in to deliver that kind, to lead the way in that kind of physical violence.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, but because I know that isn't the case like all the time, but there is a pattern, and I agree with you. I do think there's just this thing about this level of power that is unchecked, and I do think it's very attractive to a certain type of person. And you know, back in the day, there was a time where officers knew their community because they lived in their community, right? And now with gentrification and what's happening in our cities, you know, officers and actually a lot of like public servants are living further and further out from their communities, right? So they don't know their community. So everybody in their community is a suspect. Everyone in their community is just someone to arrest basically, rather than actually a human being. You know their dad, you know their mum, you know their community, and actually you look out for them. But I think gone are those days if they ever existed, to be honest.
So just so before we go, and what I'm going to do before we finish, I want Howard, if you're still there, do you want to come on for the end, just say what else is happening at the festival? So I just want to say, actually, there's another question coming. Let's just ask this question, and then we can say, then we can continue at the end.
Yeah, I'll keep
okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'll keep it brief. What I would say, we don't have time to start going into prison abolition, but anybody who's in this room thinking, is that really going to work? I urge you to read Are Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis. that is your answer. I think although we have a different context to the US, we are in a moment where actually we need to be considering viable alternatives and taking them very seriously. Calls to defund the police are not insane. They actually make perfect sense, because defunding the police means redirecting those funds to community options, right? Such as mental health services, domestic violence services, so on and so forth. We've lived in austerity for over a decade, and actually the police have already been defunded, but what hasn't happened is redirecting those funds. I understand that that isn't the only solution. It's very complicated to think about what do we do instead. But I think this is a time for us to engage in those questions and to be very open-hearted and open-minded and open-spirited to what we can have in place instead of what we have now. Because let's face it, at a basic level, we can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. The state operates in the way it does, and it's by design, and it's never, ever designed to protect Black and brown people and the most marginalised in our communities. And so look into prison abolition, follow, thinkers such as Imani Robinson, who on Instagram is like Black abolitionist, and just think about, interrogate and use critical thinking, and just think about what can we have instead of the prison industrial complex that we have now, basically, and the police as they are.
Okay, thank you, Siana. So as we just the last comment, I'm just going to say something. I'm going to pass it on to Howard. If anybody wants to copy and paste the chat, do that now. If you haven't seen the documentary, it's going to be on till midnight tonight. I've shared it. It's on here. I'm sharing it again now. So it's on till midnight tonight. It's password protected. Siana, is there any way that people can see the full length version of the video? Can you buy it on Vimeo or anything like that?
So not yet. We are going to think about this and look into this. For now, the version available is your 30-minute version, and that is a final version as well, basically. So prior to lockdown and prior to what we're doing now, basically, there was a 90-minute version. I think Troy and I will bring that back, but that is the version we'd like to screen in person. So when we're able to gather again and we're able to do our thing in person, just keep an eye on our website. We've got a nice new shiny website that we had created. The Courageous Film website as well is about to go live, and you will be able to keep up with us there. And when we're allowed to gather again, we'll be doing some in-person screenings, and you can likely see the 90-minute version then and there.
Well, as soon as pandemic is over, definitely me and Richard, Siana, we work together anyway through the work we do on the arms trade. But definitely when we're ready to do, when this pandemic is, we can do public events, we definitely want to be supporting you, and we want to bring you back to SC15 because you're there anyway. We want to bring you back to SC15, and we want to do some screenings around Peckham, Nunhead, around the area. And thank you so much, Howard. If you want to jump on and just say the final things about what else is happening in the film festival. This was a film food online screening, so if you haven't already, please do make a small donation to Southwark Food Bank, or if you can't make a donation, if you're around the area, just go donate some food. They do need it right now. Everyone's during this pandemic, and Southwark Food Bank are just doing some amazing work to support their local community. So yeah, please, Howard, you want to jump on and just say any final comments? The food bank located in Peckham for Rachel. It's in Peckham. It's easy. It's called Peckham in Peckham. So it's easy to find. Just ask anyone.
Okay, thanks, Hanan. I've just added the link again for the food bank, and also just all the other events that we've got as part of the festival. So a huge thank you to Siana for coming along. We really appreciate you being a part of the festival.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for this festival. It's so vital. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And good luck with taking the film forward and maybe more tour and around on tour and stuff. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
And thanks to Hanan and Richard from the Rainbow Collective for doing this Films for Food screening. We really appreciate you being a part of the festival, and a big part of our festival, with everything that you've done. There's a Women in Film event tomorrow. There's Hanton Films on Thursday with Siana Banton's film, The Closer I Get to You. Friday live screening, which I think is sold out. Saturday, the Exploding Cinema. And Sunday, we've got the Nunhead Elvis, who's going to be performing live outside the Green Nunhead. So I think that's everything. But if I've missed anything, then please have a look at our website. And just thank you everyone for coming along to the event tonight. It's been really interesting and I think quite vital discussion to have.
Thank you. I'm just going to add my Insta as well if you want to find us there, and also we're Courageous Films as well, so you can find us everywhere. All right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Please just copy and paste that chat. And if anybody needs to just, I think you can even save it from the chat. Just copy and paste anyway. And watch the documentary. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Seen it once, do what I did. Watch it for the second time. It is a powerhouse. It's so vital. That's the first thing I thought when I finished watching. I thought, this is such an important documentary. It needs to be out there. I'm really looking forward to what Siana and Graham and Troy, what the team do next. Definitely pass our regards on Troy as well. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Peckham Nunhead Film Festival. It's a special film festival, guys. It's generally when the festival's running, everything is free. We talked about gentrification before. You know, our area, Peckham, is doing massively. What I love about Peckham Nunhead Film Festival, when we first started getting involved with them, they came to our community. We were living on the Ledbury estate, and we did an outdoor screening of a film for children in our community. We showed Coco. You know, and so they brought the festival to our community, to the estate, and I thought that meant a lot to us. And they did the following year. It was Spider-Man versus the Spider-Verse, and I think just those doing that stuff like that just shows the motives of a film festival like this. So please support what they do. If you can in person, go. If you feel comfortable, go to the actual events. If not, follow the online events. There's loads of stuff happening. Very much, everyone. Yeah.
Oh, just can I quickly say, One Bum Cinema at the Green, Nunhead for the rest of the week. I'm really sorry I forgot that. It's just a single seat cinema that you can go to. So please try and get along before Saturday.
Brilliant.
Bye,
Okay,
everyone.
cool.
See you next time, guys.
All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye.